So welcome back into another One Piece card game video, and today's video is going to be pretty quick. We're going to discuss the top 5 decks out of November 2023, and I plan to do this every month. Hopefully towards the end of December we can kind of know what the best decks are, or at least the approximate decks after OP05, because this list is going to be completely changed after OP05. We've had a good amount of regionals and things like that, so let's just get into the types of decks and what they're about. And of course, this is in no particular order, and the other thing about this is that you can see any of these decks on eggmanevents.com. This is where I got it from, and I'm going to credit every single deck and whose deck it is. First up is going to be Red Purple Luffy, which is this is the first place list from the UK regional. If you are not familiar with him, of course I've done beginner guides for every single 3 captain and Luffy is a pretty strong one. He has a trade-off of having 3 life, being a 6k leader, just having that little bit of defense, and his activate main allows you to ramp 1 Dawn when you have 0 or you have 8. Of course, in this current format, we don't have, for the US anyway, we don't have 9 drop Newgate at 4. We only have at 1, which is why you only see 1 here. And the full focus of this deck is to get to things that are a higher cost. So like this 7 cost kid that gives you 1000 power, becoming a 7k leader on swing and defense. We have the 4 of 10 drop Luffy and a bunch of cards that allow you to ramp, like the Sasaki, sorry, the Gene Bart, and as well as the Basil Hawkins, which this deck loves to go second in order to get that extra Dawn. That All-Star Calamity, in order to ramp 1 active Dawn to swing 7 and draw a card, is not bad, especially with that trigger. This deck is really for the person who likes ramp strategies, who likes bigger bodies, and you know, it's really hard to say what type of deck it is. You know, there is some argument to say that it is kind of like an aggro deck, because all you really do is play bigger bodies, swing hard, and that's pretty much it. There are a few cards that you should probably know if you're going to go into this deck or playing this deck. Obviously Basil Hawkins and also our Calamities, whatever the translation you might have, US or other, basically allow the Luffy player to ramp going second. And that's usually what they want to do. They want to go second, they want to do this, they want to go into Kid immediately after, and kind of go from there. And we do have the Gene Bart going first, and that allows them to do that on turn, or 5 Dawn to get to 7 immediately after. Or they also have Gene Bart to ramp as well, going first, allowing them to go to 6 Dawn, and then the following turn they can go to 8 as well. And of course, if you're going second, you can always play All-Star Calamities or Basil Hawkins on 6 Dawn, and then ramp 1 more, and then use the remaining Dawn to attack or do whatever you need to do. Queen allows them to cycle through all of the cards like Shanks and 7 drop Kid, and as well as any of the other cards that I mentioned, like the 10 drop Luffy, so that way they're not breaking out of their hand, because it's really important for them to defend early on and they don't take early life, because it could be kind of in danger later into the game when there's bigger attacks. So it's pretty important for you to swing 6s and get those cards out of hand and put yourself in a good position. It's just like the same set strategy as Whitebeard. It's just that this time they don't have as the same amount of cards in hand, and they have a lot lower life, so that way they can't use that life total as a resource. All right, next up is the next Red Purple deck, and this is the Trafalgar Law. It's the one that does not allow you to have anything on board. And he says that you get to -3 bottom deck a 3k power or less character back to the opponent's deck, and then play a 4 or less character from your hand. And what this basically means is that you're going to be playing something that is very aggressive. You're gonna have a lot of bodies on board, and you're gonna have that trade-off of minusing Dawn into removing things on their board. And of course you play things like the Gordon, like the Zoro, like the page 1 package, along with the Trafalgar Law TP that hasn't really been played in very long. And this is the second place deck from Benjamin from the UK regionals as well. And yeah, I mean, this deck is pretty consistent in what it does. Has a lot of different attackers, plays heat to have that 6k swing almost every single turn that you do use your leader ability, and you just have, you know, 5 to 6k bodies that swing at the face almost every single turn. And this is really good against decks that can't really keep up with that, right? So like Yellow Purple Croc, Katakuri, you know, things of that nature. And even against like things like Grape or Green Purple Dofi, it does do pretty well against, at least in the early game. A few cards that you should know and be aware of is that the Beppo and Sachi kind of enables the Law players to continue to do what they want to do when minusing Dawn. The Beppo basically says that if you have less Dawn than your opponent, which is going to happen with that leader effect, you're going to be able to ramp a Dawn. All right, here's some cards that you might want to take a look at if you're playing against or as. And one of the things that they really rely on as a red purple Law player is going to be the Purple Beppo, and as well as the Sachi and Penguin. So these guys are obviously the perfect 4-cost targets, because what happens is that on play with Beppo and when swinging, you get to ramp a Dawn. So you get to return a Dawn back from your Dawn deck into your field, and this really helps when it comes down to the -3, obviously, because you get to basically have a -2 with the 4 costs on board. And Sachi does the same thing, but is usually for early game. They usually don't use this as a 2k, which is usually fine when you're talking about their defense. So if you're gonna be swinging, you know that majority of the time they're gonna be using this as a body, not as a 2k. So these guys are really important, and it's important for you to get rid of that Beppo more often than not. You really want to you really make sure that their engine's not working. Gordon is another good one. You know, there's Hydra as a -1 and -3000, and then there's also Gamma Knife coming out in LPO4 or LPO5. And really, you know, Gordon is just that really good card for this deck. Obviously, it doesn't count towards your counters, but it is something that basically says that anything with 6k or less is going to be able to be removed for one simple Dawn and that -3. So what usually happens is that they'll play something first, like a Zoro for 3 or something else for 4, play another one, or play a Gordon for 1, and then minus something 6k or less. There's not really much you can do about this, but just be mindful when it comes down to your 6k bodies. Roundtable is also another one. It basically says everything in the game is going to be able to remove. It's a hefty 4 cost, but if you're saying 4 -3 and then play a body and then get rid of literally anything, it's really a good trade-off. And then lastly, Trafalgar Law is basically just another set of Otama. Otama is played in this deck, obviously, but -2k in a 4/5 body is pretty good. Next up is second place Robert from the Carta Magica Treasure Cup. I actually commented this one, and it was a very interesting match with a vertical video, but you know, it doesn't really make much difference when you have a really good deck, because this deck is really quite good at what it wants to do. The leader says if you put 1 Dawn under, you get to swing for 7 effectively, and you get to look at your life or your opponents and put it at the top or bottom. And this is really good with all the combination of Brûlé in order to manipulate that, Beige to stop attacks, and as well as things like Sanji to get those blockers out on board as well. This also leans on all of the bigger cost or higher cost cards like the Paraspero and the Randolph into the Lin, Charlotte Katakuri, and of course the 10-drop Big Mom. If you've been playing a little bit of One Piece, you've probably seen this deck. It is actually a really, you know, easy to play deck at the end of it. Like if you know the lines of play, you protect your life early on, you have a lot of Q-keys in hand and swirls in the deck, and it just is a good deck to start out and to be consistent with. So, you know, you have to watch out for the Parasperos if you're playing against it, because on KO you get to look at the top 3 and then make your deck a lot more consistent. If you're playing blue or even purple now, you get to bottom deck it, return it, whatever it may be, to get around those on KO effects. And you know, as Katakuri, it is pretty much one of your best early turn plays. Then we have Thunderbolt. It is such a huge card. If they have any kind of life, you know, they're going to be playing it in order to get rid of any of those blockers like Queen or Sanji in the mirror match, things like that. And it is also something to kind of play around if you're playing against Katakuri, because you know, you could get popped to 5 or less. Then of course Katakuri gets around things like green purple Dofi and their 7 drops, and Luffy, it gets Rebecca, a lot of different removal types, and in correlation with the, or really I should say tandem with the 10 drop Big Mom. If they place it on top and then next they play Big Mom, they're just gonna trash it right after from your life. This deck really should not have much introduction. It is a very common deck. It is a very good deck. It's won a couple events at this point, and it's not going to go anywhere from now into the next couple sets for One Piece. All right, next up should be a pretty popular deck at this point, which is green purple Dofi. And this is the first place deck from Gerald from the Core TCG Treasure Cup. I believe that was actually the online event with green purple in the finals. And honestly, there's not really much to talk about this deck as far as deck variety, right? When we talk about the cards, it's a little bit different, but the whole goal of this deck is to set up your film package on board, control the board for your opponent through Pump Gibson, and restand your blockers through Spiderweb, and your, of course, leader gets 2 Dawn at the end of the turn to play with for those event cards. So it is a pretty defensive deck. It is probably one of the, I would say, a mid-range deck, one of the best mid-range decks that you can play. I wouldn't say really control, but definitely a mid-range deck, because you're playing a lot of mid to high costed cards, and of course that 10 drop Dofi. Things to know and cards to watch out for are going to be that Nami, which is one of those cards you have to kind of get rid of off the board at any point. As a Doflamingo player, you want to go second in order to play Nami, going second on for Dawn, right? So if you play Nami on 3, you get that extra draw, looking at the top 3, getting a film card, which is a pretty easy get at the end of the day. Uta is paired with Brook on the Luffy, because Luffy plays a 4 cost afterwards. Brook gets to play a 3 cost afterwards as well. You can play some of the vanilla targets and things like that, but Uta is really good with Luffy because now you have 2 blockers, and Uta gets to rest a 5 or less on the board after minusing 1 and blocking. So this is the whole game plan for green purple Dofi, right? It's very straightforward. There's not too many different lines of play, but as far as deck variety, there are some, right? With the Onigiri style 3 costs, you can play more of those 3 cost film cards, including the vanilla package. You know, that version of the deck, depending on what you play and what you include into it, really does focus on filling up the board really quickly, swinging 5, 6, 7k swings, and you know, having those 2 cost event cards like Pokets to kind of protect you. Of course, Doflamingo, the 10 drop, basically extend yourself in a turn because you can protect yourself so easily, and because it basically says no to a few different attacks. It's really good against green Kid for them not to swing twice. Really good against Luffy to force them, and Rebecca for them to remove or return those cards back into deck. You know, there's a lot of different things, and of course in the mirror you have to kind of learn when to 10 drop Dofi and who gets to it first. And then lastly is the 5th spot. You know, I can't really decide who is in that 5th spot right now, and of course this is going to change into OPO 5 with all of the new decks coming out. And you know, I think it is a cross between these 4 decks. Queen is super good, just kind of lost its bad match. This worst, its best matchup against Whitebeard when it got banned, the leader that is, along with Rebecca. Rebecca is a very interesting deck. It's not for everyone, and it takes a little bit of time to get used to and to be successful with. Same thing for Queen, but when you get into that Queen loop where you either draw or take life or gain life through both your Yamatos, your 8 drop categories, etc., right? You basically put your opponent in a really crazy state. So that means early into the game, you really want to make sure that you're swinging pretty hard, you're swinging a lot, and you have plans to remove either their blockers or their bigger boys, so that way they can't recover cards. Of course, next up is Kid and Crocs. Now, Kid is going to be a long time favorite, I think, for a lot of different people. You know, being able to tap 3 and swing twice pretty much at any point is really good. It gets around the 10 cost Luffy as well to get that extra swing in case you are going against the green mirror. And you know, the film package is really quite good. I'm sure in the coming sets, both OPO 5 and OPO 6, he's going to get some good green support in general. He's just a really good generic green leader. Same thing for Croc, right? Where Croc basically says no to all of the on KO effects for any of the decks that are relying on those, and as well as just a really good removal based deck. He is a little bit of a bit of a boring one, only because, like, you know, at the end of the day, you really are just removing a lot of different things off their board, and you know, it's there doesn't really, like, I would say, like, you can play the Set Tomorrow package, you can kind of go a little bit on the higher end and just play all the smaller removal, but you know, it doesn't really do anything special outside of being a really good generic blue leader. So I can't really say it is one of the best decks, but it is a really good regulator for a lot of different decks. And of course, Rebecca, like I said, is not for everyone. You know, it is really good against, I think it's good against decks that rely on blockers, things that need, you know, things to exist on the board, like Law. You know, even though that could go a little awry, like the red-green Law can, and as well as the red-purple Law, can easily rush down a Rebecca player. But, you know, it really depends on the Rebecca player. It depends on what kind of matchup knowledge that they have. And with that 5 life, it's a little bit better than most multicolor leaders because of that. So, you know, that caveat on not being able to attack is a little bit of a detriment. And that's pretty much it. So hopefully this helps you at least get updated and stay up to date with some of the best decks in the format right now for OPO 4.5. And of course, we're only a couple of weeks away until the next set, so I'll see you in the next one.